Also going along with parts of an experiment is once you get your experiment set up and you're going to conduct your experiment, you have to think about what type of data you're going to collect. Because remember, your dependent variable is what you're going to measure in the experiment. So you need to think, even before you even do the experiment, what is it that you're going to measure? What is the type of data you're going to collect in your experiment? And there are really two types of data that we talk about. One of them is called quantitative data, and that's your numerical data. I like to think of the word quantity when I think of that, because it kind of looks like that when you look at quantitative data. The other type of data is qualitative. This is what we know as descriptive data. And the word we like to think of there is quality, because if you think of the quality of something, you're going to describe it, right? Both of these types of data are organized into tables, and then oftentimes they can be graphed as well, especially when we think of the quantitative type of data. So if you're looking at back at our example with our plants that are given fertilizer and plants that were not given fertilizer, if we wanted to gather quantitative data on this, we might measure how tall the plant gets, because that we could measure in centimeters or millimeters in terms of how tall that plant is going to grow over time. If we were to count the number of leaves that are produced on the plant, that would also be a quantitative type of data, because we're counting numerically how many leaves that are on there between the plant that was given fertilizer and the plants that were not. Qualitative data would be more using descriptors of it. If we wanted to look at kind of how healthy the plant was, we might use more descriptive words like how green is the leaf? Are the leaves a dark green? Are they a yellow? So anytime you talk about the color of something, you might talk about that. That's a qualitative type of data. If in chemistry, if you're doing some sort of lab where you might have to denote what the smell is of a certain chemical reaction, smell is considered qualitative data. The texture of something, how smooth or how rough a surface is. In earth science, when they're looking at rocks, let's say, or something like that, they might have to not only describe the color, but the texture, the taste, how smooth, how brittle, how hard, any of those types of things. So those are all qualitative types of data. And again, we organize this data. You can't just have it out there and it's just a mess. You have to organize it in some way, and that's where we'll get into our next section that's going to deal with tables and graphs. But before we do that, let's do a little bit of practice on the difference between qualitative versus quantitative data. So we have a list there of different types of data. And so your job is to try to figure out, is that referring to qualitative data or quantitative data? So the first one is temperature. Now, is that something we can measure with numbers? Yes, it is. So is that qualitative or quantitative? That would be quantitative. So temperature goes here. Okay. Color. Is that something you can assign a number? I don't really think so. So color is more descriptive, so that would go into qualitative data. How about texture and feel? Hopefully you put that under qualitative. The mass of something, you probably had to do a lot with that in physical science if you took physical science last year. That is definitely a quantitative data. You'd measure mass in grams, usually. The smell of something, again, you're describing it, aren't you? So that would be qualitative data. And then volume, can volume be measured with a number? Yes, if you're going to measure the milliliters or liters of something, that is quantitative data. So make sure you understand that we always have to gather data, because that's the only way you can either support or disprove your hypothesis is by analyzing your data to see does it support or not. And so we need to collect, if we can, it's great if we can collect both qualitative and quantitative data. Some experiments may lend themselves more to quantitative data. Some experiments may lend themselves better to gathering qualitative data. But oftentimes we are trying to collect both if we can, to really give ourselves some good data to analyze for our results.